Episode 76, Finding Freedom in Surrender. Welcome to Longing for More, where Christians come to strengthen their faith, revive their soul, and learn to live their lives with a sense of fulfillment and peace. Listen each week to learn how to incorporate your faith into your daily activities, stop wandering through life feeling empty and unfulfilled, and begin to live your more. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. I am so excited that I have another guest with me today, and it's another new friend. I've talked about that before, and that's one of the joys that I have in being able to do these podcasts is meeting new people who have found their more in different ways. And it's always so much fun to find out how God has been working in their hearts. So today I want to introduce Natalie. She has a really unique story on how she was on a path and God was like, excuse me, we're going to try something different here. So first of all, Natalie, I want you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and whatever you want to share. Just let us know who you are and what's going on.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I'm Natalie. I have kind of a little bit of a crazy path, which you mentioned, which I won't go into now, but I am doing brand design. So I do like a lot of graphic design. I've always been very artistic. So it's fun to get to live out that side of me. But I am from Minnesota. I actually lived all over the place, but I'm back here now in Minnesota, and I have a daughter who is almost 5, and so she keeps me busy.
Yeah, I'm so appreciative that you are here today. And as I mentioned when we were talking about getting together, my audience aren't necessarily entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And so brand design may or may not be their thing, but it's the story of how you were on a path and you got this knowing that it was time to change your path. Could you tell us how that came about? And what I'm really interested in are some of the cues that you got that you needed to make some changes. So tell us about that, if you would, please.
Definitely, yeah. And I feel like even now, there's stuff that I can add to it. So basically, I do have my own business now. And becoming an entrepreneur was never something that I was interested in before or even really had any idea about. But, just the way that came about, I, reached a point where I was a single mom and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do for a real career that would make me real money, to live off of. And so that's kind of what, I knew I wanted to go back to school. And so that was the place that I was coming from, though, of, all right, let's see, how can I do this? And I was new in my faith at the time, too, in my own true faith, not faith handed down to me that I had grown up with. But I was really just kind of starting to take that seriously. And so obviously looking back now, I can see, well, I didn't involve God in that at all. I was just like, how can I make money? I really like healthy food. I think I want to help people do that. So I'll study nutrition. Dietitians seem to make a lot of money. So that was my thought process. And of course, some of that was more subconscious, but now I can look back and see that. And so I went and did that. I almost finished my degree. And that last winter break, right before the last semester, that was the kind of the cue for me, like you said, was I feel really burnt out. And if I'm honest with myself, I don't know if I even want to do this anymore. And it was kind of scary to even admit to yourself, wait a minute, I really, really wanted this. And I thought this is what I was supposed to do with my life. And it was going to give my life meaning. And I don't know if this is what I need to do. And that kind of was the point where I started involving God in the process. And, I at that time in my life, I wasn't journaling. It's hard for me to go back and really remember the exact thought process of where did I start seeking God in that, and where did I actually start allowing him to lead me and kind of surrender. but obviously he guides our steps whether we're aware of it or not. And so it was just this process of me admitting to myself that maybe where I thought I was taking myself isn't what I wanted to do, and just getting back in touch with a very creative side of myself that I had pushed aside, that had always been there my entire life through different avenues of playing the flute and painting and dancing. Like, that was always a huge part of me, and my friends knew that I was always very artistic. That was always a big thing for me, and God just kind of led me back into that, which ended up turning into starting a business. But at that moment, it was just more of like, am I changing my major? Like, what am I doing here?
I really appreciate that process. And what's really interesting is I don't know that I'd realized the parallels between our stories, because I too was a single mom
I
30
didn't know
some
that.
years ago. Yeah. Yeah. And so I was in college, and same thought process as far as I was on the path to be a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
which was something that I had always felt called to do. My grandmother was a teacher, and I admired her so much. And honestly, I mean, I had a lot of the skill sets that would have made me a good teacher. But as a single mother, I came to a turning point where I realized that if I went into teaching, not only did I have another semester or two to finish school, but I also then had to do student teaching, which would delay that opportunity to earn. And I looked at the information in front of me and went, well, shoot, if I take business, because I was going to be a business educator or whatever. And I thought, well, shoot, if I just switch my major to a business major, I can be done in a semester and I can be off earning money and providing for my new family. And so I made that shift last minute. And like you, I was I was a Christian. I was at that point I was just coming back to the church. Had been
Mm-hmm.
all my life, but had wandered away and was just kind of developing that new relationship. But I'd never even thought of the process of inviting God to help me make that decision. But as you said, I know that He directed that path, and I got that degree and got a job shortly after that in what was, I mean, I had a really beautiful career in housing for 30 years, and then got that longing. So anyway, not to make this about me, but I love the fact that you acknowledged that God was guiding you even when you didn't realize that He was guiding you. And the other thing that I loved that you said was he brought you, he had been giving you what I call breadcrumbs along the way. There were nuggets of who you were your whole life that He was
Mm-hmm.
able to bring you back to, that creative side of you that you were probably not acknowledging as what could be actually a career for you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where, like, I mentioned that I feel like that's something that I'm kind of continually going through. And even now, um, it's just kind of this process of, I feel like maybe it's almost coming back full circle, because when I started this, I was thinking, all right, this is it. This is what I'm doing. But I'm still having moments where it's like, wait, I have these things over here that I feel like God's nudging me to do. But I thought I'm doing this. Like, I thought this is what, it's like holding on to that, like, wait, this is the plan. This is my thing. This is what I'm going to do. And I've got this and I've got it down and it feels good. And I feel like I can control it. And it's just finding freedom in, like, relaxing and surrendering into His plans for us, and knowing that He puts those desires and those dreams inside of us because it's actually good if we act on them. A lot of time it's for His purposes, and, like, we might not see the connection or know how to go about it, but just having that realization, and as we're talking about, like, being in school and college and stuff, I feel like that is probably a big fork in the road moment for people. And it sounds like for you and me it was, is if you grew up in a church environment, like, it's, you hear how God has good plans for you. And then there's this fork in the road of, but now it's time to go to college. And what do you want to do? And like, there's, you know, I didn't go to a Christian high school, and I'm sure there are some great high school Christian counselors who will actually have them stop and be like, what do you feel like God's leading you to do? What have you always been really good at? Like, right. I would have loved that. But I feel like that's kind of the moment where people are like, all right, it's up to me now. And it might, you know, take them a year to get back. It might take them 30 or whatever, you know.
You know, and one of the things that I'm learning, I love that you touched on the fact that, you know, had both of us maybe been in contact with a good Christian counselor, maybe things would have turned out differently. I believe that we're on the path that we're on. And as I said in this last week's podcast that we were just
Mm-hmm.
talking about before we started, nothing in God's economy is wasted.
Mm-hmm.
And so that degree that you got will be used in your business, regardless of whether you can see that now, right?
Yeah.
It may not be the way that you thought it was going to. And the point I wanted to make is we get to those forks in the road in our lives, and we feel like there's so much pressure to make the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I think that we would be at more peace if we invited God into that decision. But the reality is, whether we do or not, when we do come back to Him and we do become obedient to Him, He will use even that quote wrong decision to get us on the path He wants us on.
Yeah.
And yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I feel like that we have so much pressure to make the right decision. And really the right decision is, like you said so many times so beautifully, is just surrendering to Him. And sometimes I mean, you're not going to get somebody writing a note saying this is what you have to do, you know. But if we make the decision that takes us on the path that brings us the most peace, then we can know that he will bring good from that. I also love that you talk about feeling like it's coming full circle, because I have felt that so many times too, where I've maybe not made a choice that I now realize was maybe my path. And I'll give you the example of when I first, gosh, it's almost 3 years ago now, left my former career to become a coach. My first thoughts were to hold retreats
Mm-hmm.
and bring women together and really help them become, give themselves permission to become their authentic self. And I kept putting that off, and, you know, doing this and then switching and doing that or whatever. And now 3 years later, I'm really coming back to that and knowing that that really is what He wants me to do. Now, have I wasted all of my time in the meantime? No, because I feel like He's helping. This time has been to help me grow my faith and develop my relationship with Him, which will only enhance any retreat that I'm going to offer, right? So
Yeah.
so yeah, I really, I love that your knowledge, or your knowing that He does plant those desires and those dreams in our heart. We'll
Mm-hmm.
just surrender to Him. He'll help make it come true. And if we don't do it the first time, He'll give us another chance, as long as we stay involved, right?
Yeah. And I love that you gave that example, because that, you know, when I was talking about the fork in the road before, and you said how, like, you know, it kind of gets at, like, um people will ask questions about, like, if you could go back in time, would you change? Like, I'm always like, no, like, it works out perfectly. And I love to look back and see, like, you know, the 2020 hindsight that we have of, like, these are the moments where I was like, all right, I'm taking control now and I'm going to do this. But when you gave that example, that made me think of kind of paralleling where I'm at right now. So I had to take you back a little bit. I had originally majored in dance in college, because that was something that I did. And I got injured halfway through the very first semester, like bad hip injury, can't dance, end of career before it started. And I was at an art school. And so I remember talking to someone else at that school, and they were doing illustration. Um, and, that can be used for books or whatever. But I remember just being really fascinated by it. And if I had stayed at that school, that's probably what I would have chosen. But I didn't, and I left. And now, I don't know how many years ago that was now, that now I'm coming back to that. And so that's something that just recently I was, in the kitchen. I think I was getting ready to cook dinner. And I just felt like God was like, just put it out there. And so I did literally just put it out there, like, hey, I've always loved the idea of illustrating like a book or a kid's book. Like if it's something that's been on your heart to write, let's talk. And someone reached out to me. And so we just talked about that yesterday. So it's just like the breadcrumbs thing that you said. I just love that, because it's like, okay, we'll just follow this crumb. Like, don't worry about like how it's going to turn out or how are you going to make it work. Just follow the one crumb and then find the next one.
Absolutely. I literally have goosebumps right now as you tell that story, because it just doesn't make sense sometimes until we stop and look backwards and then go, oh, yeah, yeah. So, so beautiful. And you mentioned earlier even that all the pieces don't always fit together.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden they do.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's an indicator of when we're really being obedient and like just relaxing into the breadcrumbs that God's leaving for us, is when we're trying to make things happen and it's just not working and things aren't falling into place. And that's not to say that some people will go do their own thing and be successful, but I feel like that's kind of a turning point for a lot of people, is they're realizing that they're trying to make this happen, and it makes them reevaluate, like, wait, should I actually want to do this? Maybe that's what I should try next. And they do, and then things fall into place.
Right. We call that things coming together when we get into alignment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting because one of the coaches that I'm working with, I mean, her whole practice is flow versus force, and helping people get into that place of just easing into what we need to do. If we're trying so hard to make something happen, it's probably not what we're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we actually did a whole episode on that in the last month or two. I think it's called The Messy Middle. And it really, and that's what happens is we want so bad. We get an idea, and it may only be a piece of the puzzle, and we latch onto it and we try to make that the thing, when it's really just one of the pieces of the whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we want so bad to know everything and how it's all going to come together. And God is this master of saying, just take the next step. We'll worry about the step after that, and when you get this done. And so sometimes I think not sometimes, most of the time, I believe we get stuck because he'll tell us to take that step, and out of fear or doubt or circumstances not making sense, we don't take that step. And then he's like, I'm just going to wait.
Right.
When you get to it, I'll be right here, but I'm not going to tell you the next step until you take that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of or ever listened to Emily P. Freeman. She's got her podcast about the next right thing. And she has, she released a book too, but I know she had, at least I'm pretty sure she had the podcast before the book, but I found her podcast through the book. And that's literally all she talks about, is just like how we make decisions. And I never realized how much goes into that. But when you said that, that just reminded me of that, because I love, I love kind of discussing that and thinking about that.
Well, I actually have heard of Emily, only because, and I don't know if I've actually listened to the podcast or not. I may have to add that to my list. But I, for a short time, joined her Hope Writers group.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that God has laid on my heart to do is to write that book. And it's also one of those things that I've been kind of going, oh, yeah, I'm not sure, And so it's interesting that God was able to sprinkle that into this conversation today, too, right?
Your
So
little friendly reminder of that thing that
it came up in the last interview, too. So he's very gentle with his nudges sometimes, but
right.
it gets obvious at a certain point
Yeah.
that's one of the breadcrumbs. and
Uh-huh.
and I think sometimes, and I've had this conversation with another coach that I've worked with, sometimes when he shows us a glimpse of what's down the road, we have a tendency to want to latch onto that and think that that means it's something we need to make happen right now.
Hmm.
Reality, it's just a glimpse of that breadcrumb that, this is just another reminder that this is coming down the path. And I will open that door for you when the time comes.
Hmm.
You don't have to feel like you have to make it happen.
Yeah. And I feel like there's this tension of, even within the faith community, of, getting dreams that may be for the future, and then also this message of, but we don't know what's in store for tomorrow, and we don't know how long we're going to be here on earth. And you know what I mean? It's like this tension of, it's like, but I just got this creative download or whatever you call it, and it's like, but I should do something with it now. But it all comes down to just being in tune with God. And it's like, do I feel like I'm getting the message of wait or go?
Right.
um because I know I've felt like that too, where I'll get an idea and I'm like, is this something that's coming down the road, or is this something that I'm supposed to do now? And now I'm confused.
Right. Confusion is definitely uh, a, a place that I think Satan would love us to just stay in, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And again, I think for me, the best advice I can give anyone who's listening who may be at that point of confusion is what I'd mentioned before, is really get present, which is something we don't do very well anymore because we are
Hmm.
so busy that we don't allow ourselves space to just be present with ourself and with our Lord, and take the time to really just listen. But when we do, and we think about the options that we have available to us, you get that sense of peace when we try too hard to overthink what the right decision is. And if we follow our heart and follow our gut, the world would call into intuition. um, we'll make the right choice. And if we don't, he's the creator of the world. He'll get us back on path, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And one of, um I guess, my life verses, or one of the significant verses for me, is Jeremiah 29:11. And that's something that actually came about like in that place of being a new single mom, and something that I kind of held on to with white knuckles at that point, because I was like, the plans don't feel very good right now. Um,
Right.
but and of course I still hold on to it now, and it's something um, that I have really taken to heart, to just like, especially in those moments where the plans don't feel very good, or you have this idea that seems so far off, like just holding on to the fact that like he's got good plans, and maybe we feel like we made a wrong choice, but he knows how to redirect, and like he's still got a good plan, and we have no idea what's up ahead.
Right. I actually loved 29:11. It was my son's confirmation verse.
Mm.
And I love that you sprinkled that in, because that's always one of my questions is, what's your favorite verse? I'm not going to ask you to quote it word for word, but could you, for the listeners who may not be familiar, could you at least paraphrase it for us here?
Yeah. Now I gotta think. So yeah, Jeremiah 29:11 is where God's saying basically, For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Um, and yeah, I just know that, like, especially in that moment where it came to me, and I didn't even know that I had that verse memorized. But I just remember just like clinging to it so hard. I was like, okay.
And you did an excellent job of, if it sounded to me like you might have just read it right out of the words. So good job. It's funny. I told somebody recently, I love asking that question because a big part of my mission truly is just getting people back into the word, because it's absolutely so beautiful and so relevant, regardless of what some people will tell you. So, gonna ask you a question. My tagline is live your more.
Mm-hmm.
If I say that to you, how would you respond? What is your more?
Mm, I love that question, and it makes me think. I feel like living my more is continuing to just surrender into not feeling like I have to make the right decision or figure it out. Because as I'm thinking about like what it means to live my more, I just know that I constantly keep finding myself in this place of coming back for full circle, like I said earlier. And I feel like that's just kind of what it comes down to, is just keep coming back to that place of surrendering whatever you think the plan was, or the control piece of it, because he does have such good plans for us, and we don't know what's going to happen, and we always try to get in the way.
We do. We do. And again, you had mentioned listening to last week's podcast episode. And really, that to me is the crutch of, I talk about being in two worlds,
Mm-hmm.
one foot solidly in the world today, and the other foot solidly in our heavenly realm. And I think that is one of the primary, I mean, there are a number of things that keep us out of balance between that. And we'll never fully obviously be in heaven until after we're completely out of this world. But this world wants us to feel like we have control.
Mm-hmm.
And we will struggle with that until we recognize that we don't. Um, and once we learn the gift of surrender and accept the grace and the mercy that is ours, we will always struggle, won't we?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. This has been so beautiful. And I have to tell you, I really, really loved this conversation. All of the things that we've just talked about are so important, and they really are the crutch of reviving our soul and living our more, is getting back into the word and surrendering and being obedient to God. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you for helping me peel back another layer of that onion, following another breadcrumb on the path, however you want to describe it. Thank you for helping me get that story out there so that others can begin that process. So
Yeah, and I love this was a beautiful conversation. So we didn't know where it would go, and I loved where it went.
I do too. I do too. And I honestly, I prayed about it, and God answered my prayer today. He brought you to me at exactly the right time. And I just want to thank you for that. And I, right now, today, I think this might be my shining episode. I'm really excited about it. So thank you so much. What a gift. And I'm looking forward to staying in touch and finding out where God leads you next. So
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Have an amazing day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. I always marvel at how God can bring people into our lives, and He weaves our stories in and out together. As I said earlier, didn't know Natalie. I didn't know where this conversation was going to go, but I feel so blessed to be able to know her now and to be able to share her story with you. I'm curious as to what resonated with you in that story today. You are here for a reason. There was a message somewhere in this that he wanted you to hear, and I'm so grateful that you are here. And I feel so blessed that he uses this podcast as a platform to shine his light into the world. If you like where these conversations go, oh, and if maybe you're longing for more and really aren't even sure what it is, maybe that next retreat I'm going to do is exactly what you need today. I am planning my first, nope, it will be my second half day retreat. It's on November 16th. Actually, it's going to be in Fort Pierre. We're going to have it up at Eagles View Bed and Breakfast. Beautiful location overlooking the river. We're going to have an amazing brunch, and we're just going to have a beautiful conversation about connecting with your more. I am limited as to how many people I can have in that beautiful space. So if this is something that's of interest to you, I encourage you to hop over to vannajohnson.com/retreat and get registered right away. Space is limited, and I have early bird registration price available right now, but that will be going up here in a couple of weeks. So grab a friend, come and have a beautiful morning together, and let's have that conversation about why you're here and what your more is. Thank you so much for stopping by today. If this message is one that you think someone else in your life might need to hear, please share it with them. If you're so inclined, I would be forever grateful if you would go out and leave a comment on iTunes. That's how people find us, is by the comments on iTunes, and that's what encourages them to listen as well. Or share it on Facebook. I don't care. Just tell somebody about it, because there's people out there that need to hear these messages, and I appreciate that you are still here. Kudos to you. I value that so much. Anyway, thank you again for stopping by. Go, be blessed, and live your more.